So we're starting Megillas Esther, page 1252. Now, I'm not going through it pasuk by pasuk. We're going to go through a few of the points because Rabbi Madelon is going through it in the afternoon. He's going through the entire Megillah, But I want to go through a few concepts here, you get some fundamentals. The first thing is the backdrop to the story, which is during the period between the two Beis Hamikdashes. So the Jewish people are in Galus Bavel, and there's this prophecy lurking about the rebuilding of the second Beis Hamikdash. And Ahasuerus knows that, everybody knows that. There was a prophecy that there will be a rebuilding of the second Beis Hamikdash. And when Ahasuerus makes a calculation that the time has elapsed and the second Beis Hamikdash hasn't been built, that's when he starts with this. He starts with this party, the party to end all parties, right? This six month bash, which is only exceeded. It's only exceeded by a standard 4-year program in college, which is a 4-year bash, right? This is a 6-month bash. So Ahasuerus has this party. Now, one thing you have to understand over here before we even begin, Megillas, I don't know if you've ever seen the kids' books, but one of the problems, they have these children's books with pictures. They have the Pesach Seder. You ever see these books where they have the Pesach Seder? And the Pesach Seder always portrays the father is there and he's talking, and all the kids are sitting nicely at the table and just listening like this to Tati talking, and the wife looks fresh and rested and everything else. They never show you wine spilling and 2 kids fighting. The wife has fallen off her feet from cleaning off her Pesach. And everybody wonders, what are we doing wrong in our house? And what you're doing wrong in your house is bringing the book into the house. That's what you're doing wrong, because it doesn't work that way. So if you look at all the books on the Megillas Esther, first of all, they always portray Ahasuerus as this portly, this portly fool, and Haman is this mean-looking ogre. That's how they portray it. And Esther and Mordechai, Esther's always saying, the back page is always Haman is dangling from a tree, from the gallows. Then you have Mordechai and Esther and Ahasuerus are all waving like this with big smiles. It's a misrepresentation. First of all, Ahasuerus is a devious. I don't know if you guys are old enough to. Did you ever see Hogan's Heroes on TV? You ever saw Hogan's Heroes? Remember Klink and Schultz? They always painted the Germans. It was a comedy. They always painted the Germans as a bunch of bumbling idiots. Right? And whatever else they weren't bumbling idiots. They were, whatever else they weren't bumbling fools. And Ahasuerus and Haman are devious politicians. Ahasuerus is a dictator who wants to hold on to his throne. He's a cutthroat. Haman does not look like an ogre. People who look like ogres do not rise high in the political world. If you want to picture Haman, picture Bill Clinton, or picture nothing. No, I don't mean him personally. I have nothing against him. I'm talking about a guy. Picture what he go. I remember when what's his name was running. The guy, the Mormon. What's his name? The Mormon who ran last time against Romney. Who? Romney. Yeah, what's his first name? Mitt Romney. Right. There's a Mitt Romney. They described him as looking presidential. And people got upset, like, why? What do you mean he looks presidential? What do you mean you look? Well, he looks presidential. Bottom line is he looked presidential, as opposed to other people who don't look so presidential. And certainly Hillary Clinton. He certainly didn't. He looked presidential, right? He actually looked presidential. And so Haman, if you want to picture John Kennedy, picture somebody that you look at with I didn't say Biden. We're talking about and Trump would if you want to picture Ahasuerus, that might be a good image. A guy takes no prisoners. That sort of thing. So and again, I got nothing personal against any of well, yes, I do, but and certain ones anyway. But so that number one. Number two, you have to understand over here. Therefore, the Jewish people is a big celebration. Purim, wonderful, Purim, yeah, and everybody's singing in the streets and everything. If you've been in Yerushalayim on Purim, you'll see that there's a lot of, guys say, yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of that, yeah. And that's what it's meant to be. Meant to be a big celebration, with trying to keep it under control a little bit. And it's meant to be a big celebration. But there's one person who here is an absolutely tragic figure, which is Esther. Esther is an orphan from both parents. she ends up having to live with the goy. And then she ends up, when all the Jews are redeemed, they go to Israel, she stays in the palace and has a child from Ahasuerus. So on a personal level, for Esther, it's a personal tragedy. For everybody else, it's, that's why the back of the book, they're all waving. And Mordechai and Esther and Ahasuerus are waving. Well, three's a crowd. And Muhammad, she got divorced from her husband. She was married, according to one opinion in the Talmud, she's married to Mordechai. And now they get divorced. So the Esther is a personal tragedy. Esther herself is a personal tragedy. But obviously she's going to get reward in the world to come that people can't imagine. But and if you go through the story, you'll see that Esther is a person. So what's very interesting is like this. Rabbi Akiva was once giving a shir. And people started falling asleep in his shir. People were nodding off to Rabbi Akiva's shir. So I don't feel so bad when people fall asleep. If they can fall asleep for Rabbi Akiva, they can fall asleep for me. Rabbi Akiva and I actually have something in common, by the way. Rabbi Akiva and I, besides that, Rabbi Akiva and I have something else in common. Do you know Rabbi Akiva was on the run from the Romans, and they gave him a code name. The Jews referred to Rabbi Akiva by name. He was a fugitive. He was running away from the Romans. So they called him, there's one of the Amoraim is called Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. Rabbi Yeshua was the son of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, Rabbi Yeshua the son of the bald one. So Rabbi Akiva was called the bald one, right? So Rabbi Akiva and his Talmidim didn't laugh at him. We're Shia. His Talmidim didn't laugh at him for being bald, But Rabbi Akiva, so that at least that I have in common with Rabbi Akiva. That's where the similarities end. He was once giving a shir, and his Talmidim started dozing off in shir. So Rabbi Akiva said to them the following. He said, "Why don't take a look at the beginning of the Megillah, the first pasuk. Vaybi me'Achashverosh Achashverosh haMolech meHodu ve'Adkush Sheva v'Esrim u'Mea Medina." 127 countries, provinces, however they translate. How does he translate provinces? Okay, provinces, countries, whatever it is. It basically ruled over the known world. So Rabbi Akiva saw some of his Talmidim were dozing in shir. So he said, why is it that Esther came along, and Esther marries the king, and she essentially becomes the ruler, or the co-ruler, over 127 countries. Why does Esther rule over 127 countries? So Rabbi Akiva said to his Talmidim, well, Esther is a descendant of Sarah Imenu, and Sarah Imenu lived to 127. So it makes a lot of sense that Esther, who is a descendant of Sarah Imenu, who lived 127 years, she should rule over 127 provinces. Okay. Really? Makes sense? I mean, good. Yeah, let's play connecting numbers. Yeah, 127, 127. Yeah, what? So what's he got to do with the other? What's Rabbi Akiva saying? He's obviously trying to make a point. What's he saying? What was Rabbi Akiva? What did he mean by that? What was Rabbi Akiva trying to communicate? So the commentaries explain like this. First of all, they say, by the way, they just say almost tongue-in-cheek. Well, if 127 years is 127 provinces, so 1 year is a province, right? 1 year is let's call it a country. 1 year is equals a country. That means 1 month equals a state, and 1 week equals a city, and 1 day equals a town, and 1 hour equals an entire neighborhood, and 1 minute equals an entire street. So if you miss 1 minute of Torah because you're sleeping in shir, so you lost the street. That's what Rabbi Akiva was trying to do. He's trying to communicate the value of time for those who were falling asleep during the shir. That's tongue in cheek. What's really going on is that if you take a look at the lives of Esther and Sarah Imenu, then you'll see an interesting parallel. What's the parallel? What's the parallel between Esther and Sarah Imenu?
They're both under capture because Sarah was kidnapped or basically taken hostage by Pharaoh, and Esther was basically taken hostage.
Good. They were both taken by non-Jewish kings. And not only that, Sarah was taken twice.
But then I just read something about this. Esther was very upset because all these negative things happened to Pharaoh. He was afflicted and all these things after Sarah left, but it never happened with Ahasuerus.
Even more. Sarah walks away. Good. Sarah walks away. Twice she's taken, and both times she walks away unscathed. Esther is taken once by a Goyish king, and she ends up having to live with the guy. And she ends up having to, what do you call it? So what happened? What's Rabbi Akiva concerned about? Rabbi Akiva was concerned about, you're going to read the story over here, and you're going to walk away and you're going to say, well, I guess Esther is not what she's cracked up to be. Because if she would have been on such a high level, so she would have managed to get away too. Says Rabbi Akiva, don't think so. She's a descendant of Sarah Imenu, the same way that Sarah Imenu was a totally righteous tzaddikus, Esther was a totally righteous tzaddikus, which then begs the next question, which is if she was a totally righteous tzaddikus, so then why does she have to go through this fate worse than death if she's so righteous? If she is so righteous, and that's what Rabbi Akiva is making the connection, the 127, that Esther is so righteous, so then why does she have to go through this? Good question, right? Why does she have to go through this if she's so righteous? You got to go live with. I mean, how would a Jewish girl would choose death over having to live with the goy? She's a from Beis Yaakov girl. Esther's a from Beis Yaakov girl. I mean, there's a girl, she says a long benching. There's a girl, when she makes a bracha, everybody in the room hears it and says amen. You're talking about from it and from. What happened over here? The answer is they're twofold. Number one, the Jewish people during this period, if you know anything about the history of the Jewish people during the 70 years of the Babylonian exile, there's a lot of intermarriage. And when they went up, when Ezra eventually leads them back to Eretz Yisrael, he says, okay, you got to get rid of your shiksa wives. You got to get rid of your non-Jewish wives. So the Jewish people were disloyal in this area. According to the commentaries, Esther having to live with Ahasuerus and Esther living with him took no personal enjoyment or benefit out of living with Ahasuerus. That was an atonement for the entire Jewish people for that avera of intermarriage. How do you like that? That's why she has to go through with it. So it tells you the level she's on. A tzaddik is an atonement for the entire generation. Gemara says when a tzaddik dies, he's an atonement for the entire generation. Esther doesn't, sometimes somebody once said, Jews through history have given up their lives rather than convert to Christianity. Very simple Jews said, listen, you're not going to tell me what to do. Kill me. I'm not bowing down to the ground. I'm not going to kiss the cross, and I'm not going to bow down to whatever it is. Jews, which is true. But you see, somebody once said, it's a lot easier to die as a Jew than to live as a Jew. To live as a Jew is hard. You got to get to shul every morning. To live as a Jew is hard. You got to listen to the rabbi's speech in shul. To live as a Jew is hard. You got to bench after you eat. Boy, benching never comes at a good time, I'm telling you. Benching never comes at a good time. Benching is always after you've eaten. If they make benching before I ate, it'd be okay. You ever hear people say, no, are you going to eat bread today? No, I don't. You ever hear people say, are you going to eat bread at this meal? No, I don't want to wash. You ever hear people say, I don't want to wash? People say it all the time. They don't want to wash. Washing's not the problem. I can wash all day. Benching is the problem. Not the washing. I don't want to wash. I don't want to. Sometimes you say, I don't want to get fleshiks. You ever hear people say that? I don't want to become fleshiks. Guys, it's okay. You can become fleshiks. It's not a conversion. You'll come out of it. It was 6 hours later, you'll be one of us again. It's okay. You'll make it, kid. And why? That's why I told you, Jews are strange people. You sit down at a table, you got, a beautiful chicken dinner, a nice steak, whatever it is. I don't want to become fleshik. Why? Because sometime in the next 6 hours, I'm going to want to have about this much milk in my coffee, right? And therefore, I'll make the ultimate sacrifice and sacrifice an entire fleshik meal. Yeah, we're funny people. So Esther, number one, is an atonement for the entire Jewish people. Number two, there's a symbolism here. And the symbolism is that the Jewish people in the first Beis HaMikdash, they were at the pinnacle of their success as Jewish people in the first Beis HaMikdash. Then the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. They go to the Babylonian exile. Then they're going to come back and they're going to build the second Beis HaMikdash. When they build the second Beis HaMikdash, there's a shift. Because now you have the Jewish people have a Beis HaMikdash, but they're under the domination of the foreign kings, even though we have a Beis HaMikdash. That's why Hanukkah is a very interesting exile. We call it Golus Yavon, the Greek exile. You know what's unique about the Greek exile? It's an exile with a Beis HaMikdash. It's like today. We are in exile. In spite of being in the land of Israel right now, we are very much in exile. And we're told by the United States exactly what to do, what we can do. Don't let anything you read, influence you. You're being told every step of the way. The government is told every step of the way. They're dictated to what they have to do. We're very much in exile. Esther being under the domination of Ahasuerus is a symbol of a new stage of the Jewish people. That during the second Beis Hamikdash, you're going to, on the one hand, you're going to have a Beis Hamikdash symbolized by Esther being a queen. She's a queen. On the other hand, don't make any mistake, we're not in charge. There's the domination of Ahasuerus over Esther, the same domination the nations have over us. And the entire thing is a symbol of it's a completely new approach for the Jewish people. Okay, now let's take a look at the story just a little bit. Ahasuerus makes this massive celebration. And you'll notice that, first of all, there's an interesting halacha. I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you something. There was an incident that I read about. This is for sure 100% true. I remember reading about this. It was reported in Time magazine. There was a report, and then there was a report 2 years later. There was a couple that they had a 20-year-old daughter. And this 20-year-old daughter contracted a very rare disease. And the doctor said that in order for her to be cured, she has to have a blood transfusion from a similar gender sibling. That means the only way that she could be cured is if she has a blood transfusion from her sister. There's only one big problem here. She didn't have any sisters. She was an only child. And she was 20 years old. And her parents were both in their mid-40s. And both parents had already done, what's it called, where they can no longer have children. A vasectomy. Huh? Father got a vasectomy and the mother had her tubes tied. Yeah. And so now what they needed to do is first of all, they're both in their mid-40s, which reduces the chances of having children in general. Having to reverse a vasectomy or having to reverse the tube size also greatly reduces the chances of having children. Plus, that our chances are already a 50% that it's not going to be right because it could come out a boy. Plus, the child, she would have to survive long enough for the child, they can't do any blood transfusion until the baby would be at least 6 months old. Plus, it would have to be the right blood type. And the couple decided, they did it, they went ahead. Every single piece of the puzzle fell into place. Reversed the surgery, she got pregnant right away, had a child, it was a daughter, lived 6 months, the right blood type, boom, boom. The medical establishment said the chances of this happening were beyond beyond miraculous. And then they had a picture in Time magazine 2 years later. I saw the picture 2 years later. The girl is 22 years old with her 2-year-old sister who saved her life. So, and of course, people wrote into the magazine that, it's wrong to bring children into the world to save other people's lives. Everybody's got an opinion. If it would be a monkey, it'd be okay. But if it were a whale, so that you could bring children into the world to save whales, but not human beings. So everybody has an opinion. All the monkeys wrote in to the newspaper, the talking monkeys. So they had a picture to it. Now, if somebody would ask you, what are the odds? What were the odds over here? The odds were Esther. By the way, I don't know if you guys have heard, there is a Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael who is 88 years old. You heard about this? His wife is 55. He was married. He was married already. His first wife was Nifter. They never had children. He married this woman 5 years ago. And they just had a baby.
At 55.
At 55 and 88, yeah. Yeah, they just had a baby, yeah. They just had their first baby. Yeah.
That has a sense of humor.
Yeah, Hashem has a sense of humor, yeah. That is what I think everybody has been thinking, yeah. And they just had the baby. They had a picture of him with the baby. They had a picture of him with the baby. It's unbelievable. He's a big Talmid Chacham. He's one of the Gedolim. He's one of the Gedolim, never had children. And he has a child. It's beyond, there is nothing you could possibly say. First of all, anything you would say, everybody else is thinking, right? That's for sure. And there's nothing you could say because it's so in this case over here. Now I want to ask you a question. In that case with the husband and wife, I'm bringing this up for a reason. Every single step of the way was something that you could explain medically and from a human perspective. That oil burns 8 days when there's only enough for it to burn 1 day cannot be explained from a human perspective. That's clearly the hand of God involved. Here, what you have is a series of occurrences. The odds against each one are astronomical, and then when you multiply them together, they're even more against you, yet it happened. Okay? The difference between Hanukkah and Purim, if you take a look at Purim, the story over here, not once will you see, well, when you learn the Gemara talks about supernatural occurrences. But in the storyline based on the psukim over here, all you're going to see is a series of coincidences, where the odds are astronomically against it, but it's a series of coincidences which ends up working out well for the Jewish people. And that's why there is a halacha that when we read the Megillah, we read it twice, by the way. You read the Megillah once at night, and you read it again during the day. You have to hear every single word of the Megillah. Every single word. If you didn't hear one word of the Megillah, you're not fulfilling the obligation. You have to hear every single word. Why? Because every single word in the Megillah is part of the sequence of these inexplicable coincidences. The odds against it happening are just ridiculous. The odds are absolutely ridiculous. And yet it happened. And that's why it's called Megillas Esther. Esther comes from the word Hester, means what? Hester means hidden. Hidden. It's a hidden miracle. You know, when you think of Dylan, you're on a roll today, baby. When you think of a miracle, what do you think of? Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting in a sea. You know, that sort of thing. You know, doom, poof, type of miracle. There's nothing over here at any step of the way that you would think to yourself, wow, what beyond nature. It's not beyond nature. It was very much within nature, but that itself is a coincidence. The very fact that ask anybody who got married. Anybody ask anybody who in the frum world, when they make a shidduch, or even anybody not frum, but in the frum world, when they ask the people about a shidduch, how did their shidduch happen? How did they happen to meet their wife? And somebody would say, well, it was a shadchan, right? Sometimes there's a guy who taps you on the shoulder and says, oh, by the way, I happen to know somebody, there are all sorts of funny stories. And none of them are beyond nature. None are beyond nature. They're all within nature, but it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Well, yeah, that's quite a coincidence over here. And what a coincidence. And that coincidence multiplied, that's what's going on in the Megillah. Okay, so now they have this party. And you'll notice another one of the coincidences. If you look at the Bayami Mahem, in those days, third line, Ahasuerus is sitting on his throne, which is in Shushan. Page 1252, third line. Ahasuerus is sitting on his throne. Now, gentlemen, the Gemara says his throne is, the capital was not in Shushan. The capital was in some other Persian city. And what happened was Ahasuerus, he had this thing about having a throne like King Solomon's throne. The Medrash describes King Solomon's throne had lions and eagles and inlaid with gold and gems, and the animals were actually activated in King Solomon's throne, and it was just this magnificent structure. And Ahasuerus decided, I want a throne like King Solomon's throne. So he brought in the best artisans in the world, the sculptors and the craftsmen, and they went and they made this throne which weighed tons. And then they realized they got a bit of a problem. Now we got to move the throne from Shushan, which is where they built it, to the capital city. And it would be roughly, if I had to pick an analogy, it would be like the president saying, I want you to build me the best golf course in the world. So they go and build this unbelievable golf course somewhere in Arizona. And then they say, oh, now how are we going to move it to Washington? We forgot you can't move golf courses. Right? So the capital becomes in Arizona. And with the president, you can certainly see our president not having thought of that in advance. But the craftsmen, here we're talking about the craftsmen. And then they build this throne. Okay, now we got to transfer it from Shushan to the capital. Say, well, how are we going to do that? Well, put it on the camel. No, bad idea. Unless you like Camel cigarettes, crushed camels. How are you going to? How are we going to transfer? All right, so I'll move the capital to Shushan. Why? Because Mordechai is in Shushan. I once read about a plane crash. There was a plane crash years and years and years ago. So Time magazine was describing the plane crash was a result of pilot error. They forgot to check something, and when they described it in the article, they said what the pilots overlooked was the equivalent of somebody getting in their car and driving and forgetting to close the door. That's how they described what the pilots overlooked in this plane crash. So if you stop and think about they were blinded. That's the hand of God. But it's a coincidence. There was no splitting the sea. There's no crashing thunder over here. Just a bunch of guys who forgot something. Remember I told you about the satellite? Rabbi Salinger told me about this. I think Rabbi Gottlieb told him. Amar Rabbi Salinger, Amar Rabbi Gottlieb. There was NASA designed a satellite that was a new satellite that NASA designed, which they were going to send up into space. And the unique feature of the satellite was that at every 24 hours it would shut down and recharge itself for 12 hours. And then it would operate for 24 hours, then shut down and recharge itself for 12 hours so that it could perpetuate itself. So they sunk in, NASA built a satellite that probably cost billions. They put the satellite up into space, and sure enough, it ran for 24 hours. And after 24 hours, it shut down. And then, sure enough, they're monitoring the battery, and it's working with like clockwork. If the battery is recharging. It's got 12 hours of recharge, and then they decided to reactivate it. They said, "Okay, Jim, you want to hit that reactivation switch?" "Oh, it's not me. It's that's Bill's department. Bill, you want to hit that switch?" "Oh, it's not me. It's Chuck. Chuck, want to get that switch?" "I didn't do the switch. Mark was involved with the switch." They forgot to design a return-on switch in NASA. And that satellite lasted all of 24 hours. That was it. Billions of dollars. Why? That's what happened over here. So they build this throne, and he moves himself to Shushan Abira, and then they go and they make this party. Okay, now, at the party, what's his goal? What's Ahasuerus' goal of the party? He wants to get the Jews. He wants to get the Jews to come to the party. Mordechai tells the Jews, don't go to the party. Mordechai says, I don't want you going to this party. And the Jews insist on going to the party because we don't want to get the king angry. We don't want to get the king upset. King invites you to the party, you go to the party. Mordechai says, I don't want you to go to the party. It's not good to go to the party. You're going to mix with the Jews. And by the way, and for the Jews who went there, Mordechai made sure the food was all kosher and everything. But Mordechai was the Gadol Hador. He said, don't go to the party. It's not good for us to mix at the party. And then at the party, Ahasuerus is celebrating, and the underlying celebration here is that Beis HaMikdash is not going to be rebuilt. That's what's underlying the entire thing. And 6 months, and after 6 months, he makes another 7-day party for the nearest and dearest. Look at what he's invested over here. And if there's anything you could possibly want at this party of Olam Hazeh, whatever the pleasures of Olam Hazeh were abundantly available at this party. Whatever you want. And then on the last day of the party, skip down, he's got this queen. Now here you got an interesting conversation. Because Ahasuerus says to Vashti, first of all, it says in Pasuk Tes, take a look at Pasuk Tes. Gam Vashti Amalka Asasa Bishte Noshim Besa Malchus Asher Lamelcha Ahasuerus. Right in the middle of the page. Vashti also made a party for the women. And the Gemara says, well, what were they doing at the party? It says, well, they were immoral. Right? It was a sorority party. Right? Somehow, you had the frat party and the sorority party, and they mixed. Guess what happened? They weren't discussing philosophy. So Vashti has all the women over there, all the women at the party, and then what do you call it? Now there's another medrash. There's an interesting medrash that says, what were the women doing at the party? So there's a medrash, and I'm not making this up. You're going to think, oh, this is Kaplan again. And it's not. I'm telling you what the medrash says. The medrash says Vashti was giving the women a guided tour. This is where the king eats. This is where he conducts business. This is where he entertains. This is where I gave a guided tour. The medrash says we see from here that women need to know everything. Women want to know all the details. They're very curious creatures. They're curious / suspicious. That's why they're curious. And the women are very, very curious. And she gives them an entire thing. Now, when we talk about the curiosity of women, do you know why they're curious? You know why God created them curious? What do you think?
I mean, they took
Nothing.
the apple.
What's that?
They took the apple.
It wasn't an apple. Whatever else it was wasn't an apple. They were curious. That's what they were tempted. They weren't curious. They were tempted. Why are they curious? What?
Keep us on our toes.
That's it. 100%. The woman, a wife is, I told you, there is nothing derogatory or pejorative or any sort of negative description of women. Even if it says that women talk a lot, just because you're right, HaKadosh Baruch Hu programmed them that way, because if they use speech properly so they can encourage people and they drive carefully and all other characteristics. All other characteristics of women. The curiosity is because they have to keep their men in line. A husband comes home or a kid comes home from school, the wife says, mother says, did you eat your sandwich? How was lunch today? Did you eat your sandwich? What happened in school today? You know, men don't care. Men don't care. As long as they didn't get called by the principal, the men are fine. You know, as long as the kid wasn't arrested in school, that's fine. Mother comes up, did you eat lunch? How was lunch? What did you do today? And eventually, by asking and prying, something eventually comes out. He goes, well, you know, I sprinkled some stuff on my lunch. What was it? Oh, it was this white powder that my friend Billy gave me. What powdered sugar? Well, I don't know, but I know the police came, so I don't think so. You know, and husbands couldn't care less. Men couldn't care less. You get in trouble today? Good. Go to sleep. You know, that's it. That's for husbands also. Because men sometimes get powdered sugar, like from Sufganiyot. So that men get in trouble also. Husbands come home, they got these grand ideas. The wife says, where's the rest of the money? I didn't get all the money from the paycheck this month. Oh yeah, no, it's fine. And then after supper, she says, yeah, well, you didn't tell me what happened. And she won't let it go till she finds out he's been visiting the casino. You know. By the way, they're taking the house tomorrow. Well, why didn't you tell me? That sort of thing. So it's a tchuna. Like men have certain tchuna. You have a certain character trait that's going to be developed. The women have that tchuna. Okay. Now his plan goes wrong. On the seventh day, he's drunk. And then in Pasuk Yud Aleph, he says like this: Lahavi es Vashti amalka lifnei hamelech bekeser malchus. He says, bring out Vashti with the royal crown. Vashti is a descendant of King Nebuchadnezzar. She's very beautiful. And the Gemara says, well, what do people talk about when they get to a party? So it says, when Jews go to a party, Talmidei Chachamim go have a celebration, they talk Torah. When others have a party and they're getting drunk, what do they start talking about? Well, the topography in Afghanistan. No. What do they start talking about? They start talking about immorality. They start talking about women. So everybody started bragging about the girls from here. Yeah, our girls are the nicest looking. No, our girls are the nicest looking. Ahasuerus says, listen, mine is the best of all. She's a Kazdi, and she's best of all. Want to see her? So what did they say to Ahasuerus? According to the Gemara, it said, yeah, well, only if she comes out without any clothing. You know, you stop and think about this. That's a kind of a strange thing to say to a monarch. Hey, want to meet my wife? Sure, but only with no clothing on. You know, who first of all, you know, it's kind of indiscreet. Number one. Number two. Remember, in those days there was no parole. Let's get something clear, guys. Back in the day, there was no such thing as parole. Parole officers were unemployed. In those days, there was either you behave or you die. That was it. There was no parole. It wasn't like you go in and you shoplift and you ransack a store and all that happens is they arrest the employer for calling the police. That didn't happen in those days. And it wasn't like you go and you beat somebody up, you shoot a cop, and so that they let you out every 6 months. You come back into the police station, say, hi, Jerry, and they say hello to your parole. It wasn't work that way. You behaved, you misbehaved, especially to the king. So they say, hey, you want to see my wife? Sure, but with no clothing on. What? Off with his head. You know, what's going on? The answer is these guys understood. As soon as Ahasuerus, you see, you have to understand, we're talking about politicians are playing chess. Ahasuerus says, hey, guys want to see my wife? What are you going to say? No. That wasn't a question. When he said, you want to see my wife? You have to say yes. Now, what they understand is that once Ahasuerus says, you want to see my wife? I'll bring her out. They understand that means that they're also going to have to bring out their wives. And if they bring out their wives and he happens to take a fancy to one of them, then what? Three's a crowd. So they're in a tough situation over here. As soon as Ahasuerus, everybody's having a great time at the party. I'm telling you, these guys turned white. As soon as Ahasuerus said, "Hey guys," and they're talking about women. Hey, you guys want to see my wife? I said, uh-oh. Now I understand. There's a catch-22 over here. What are we going to say? No? No. We heard she's absolutely despicable. No, you can't say that. So what are you going to say to him? Yes, but without any clothing. So I don't believe that's what they said either. They had to try to get out of it. They figure, look, if we tell him to bring in his wife, parade his wife out in a very unsneous way, they figure he'll back off. And they want him to back off because they don't want to have this contest, because then they're going to bring out their wives and then somebody's going to get in trouble. So I'm sure that they didn't say to him, yeah, but bring her out naked. I'm sure the guy said, well, Excellency, to appreciate the exquisiteness of her beauty and the subtlety of it. I'm sure it wasn't, they made it sound, they dressed it up, or, no pun intended, in such a way that somehow he'd understand that this is folly, because it is folly on his half. Because what if one of the guys takes a liking to his wife? There have also been situations like that in history where kings get knocked off. So they're trying to convince him not to, and he refuses. And he doesn't get the hint. So he sends a message to Vashti to come out. And Vashti refuses. Vashti, according to now, look what he's tried to do. Look what's happened over here. What's the French expression? Charge la femme, right?
Change the woman?
Look for the woman. Whenever there's trouble, look for the woman. There's always a woman lurking somewhere in the background. If there's trouble, there's a woman. What happened over here? Spends 6 months showing off his treasures, showing what a benevolent king he is, how powerful he is, and another 7 days, and on the very last day, he can't even get his wife to obey him. She's just pulled the plug. It's not just a question of your wife shtacht you in public. She just pulled the plug on everything he's been trying to do for 6 months. You can't even get your wife to cooperate. And why doesn't Vashti want to cooperate? Because she understands that if this doesn't work out, then if somebody takes a liking to me, you're going to be in trouble. And she's doing him a favor. She sends him a message, you drunk buffoon? What's wrong with you? So the Gemara says, you know why Vashti didn't come out? She grew a tail. That's embarrassing. Vashti would have been more than happy to go and to put herself on this place. She was an extremely immodest person. Gemara says she grew a tail. What does that mean? Vashti grew a tail? You come out there, hey, what's that? And everybody's cracking up. That'd be bad. So what does it mean she grew a tail? I don't know that the Gemara means literally. It could be literally. It says the Malach Gabriel planted a tail on her. But it could be she had some sort of unsightly sore. And for a woman, that may as well be a tail. I'm not going out now. And so Vashti refuses. So then the king decides, okay, what are we going to do with her? So he calls in the wise men. Probably calls in the Gemara says he called in the Jewish wise men. And the Jewish wise men understood that this is also a catch-22. If we say to kill her, then he's going to come back and ask you. If we say not to kill her, so he's going to say, well, what, you don't care about my honor? You don't care about my honor, my respect? So what happens? The Jewish men get out of it. They say, well, we no longer have that wisdom. Maybe call in the other. So he calls in the other advisors, and the other advisors come along and they say, listen, if word gets out that she dissed you, this is going to cost you. It's going to be a backlash on all men. The feminism movement hadn't started yet. There weren't enough Jewish women to start it. You know that the Jewish women were all the ones who started it. All movements are started by Jews. It was all Jewish women in the 60s who started feminism. Bella Abzug and all these other Jewish women. So they say, listen, we're all for chivalry around here. Send out, she's got to be executed. And then you're going to send out letters to all the countries that every man reigns, he rules the roost in his house. That's going to be, and that's how the first chapter ends. Ahasuerus executes Vashti. Now, you know the story with the prince? I told you the story with the prince and the princess, right? The prince and the princess were living together. He had a beautiful relationship. I heard this from Rabbi Salinger also. It's a Hasidic tale. It's an apocryphal story. The prince and the princess were living together, and they had a beautiful relationship. except that the princess was a slob. The princess never cleaned the palace. Why they didn't have servants is a great question, but it's a story. So the prince had loved his princess, and One day the prince says to the princess, listen, unless you start cleaning up this palace, I'm going to banish you from the palace. I'm going to throw you out. So she's lying on the couch, she's reading a magazine, and the prince, he says, you're going to start cleaning up? She goes, no. So he goes into the kitchen, and he gets a big cookie. And he says, I'm going to eat this cookie. If by the time I eat this cookie, you haven't finished this cookie, if you haven't started cleaning up, I'm throwing you out of the palace. So he starts eating this cookie. I remember the story? He starts eating the cookie, and he says, you're going to clean up? Flips the page. No, she's lying on the couch. Takes another bite. You're going to clean up? Nope. Flips another page. Finishes the entire cookie. You're going to clean up? Nope. Guards? Psh, dump her. So they very unceremoniously deposit her on the street. The next day, he regrets it. And he wants to, I want my princess back. What am I going to do? So he goes and he calls in the first wise man. First wise man says to him, there's nothing I can do for you. Actually, there's a law in the land. Once you throw a princess out, you can't have her back. Calls in the second wise man, nothing I can do for you. And he wants his princess back. He calls in the Jewish wise man. The Jewish wise man says to him, well, let me ask you a question. Was it a hard cookie or a soft cookie? He says, does that really matter? I mean, you want to know if there were chocolate chips? I mean, what does it really matter? He says, answer my question. He goes, oh, it was a hard cookie. He goes, good. If it was a hard cookie, that means there were crumbs. And your condition was that when you finish the whole cookie, if you finish the whole cookie, you'll throw her out. But you didn't finish the whole cookie. There were crumbs, right? So you can take your princess back. Ahasuerus has a problem over here. And the men know he's got a problem. Because on the one hand, they know there's going to be a backlash. And sure enough, there is. Look on page 1253. After Ahasuerus' anger subsided, Zachar as Vashti v'asher asasa v'asher nigzar lei. Remembered Vashti, remembered what she did, you remember what was decreed, she was executed. And Ahasuerus realizes, you know what, she was right. Of course she shouldn't come out here. I was drunk. But it's too late. She's dead. And she was wicked, by the way. The Gemara says she used to make Jewish girls do work on Shabbos without clothing. And that's why that was her punishment. She was wicked. She was evil. She deserved what she got. If you want to picture Vashti, again, you want to picture Vashti? There, I was going to say, but I don't want to compliment Hillary. So so Vashti is what he called. She's dead. Now, the next pasuk, this is very puzzling. Watch this. Vayomru nare hamelech misharsav. The chamber attendants. Nare hamelech means a chamber attendants. Up until now, he'd been consulting with his royal wise men. Yivakshu lamelech naros besulos tovos. You ought to get some, nice-looking girls, and you'll send out you have a beauty contest, so you pick yourself a new queen. So the commentaries ask over here, these are the guys who clean out the chamber pots. These are the Nari Amelech. Why are they giving him advice to the king, to the leader of the world? Who made them advisors? We find this by Yosef also, right? Who made them Ahasuerus advice? Hey, this is what you ought to do. You've probably seen this scene in movies a dozen times. You got the king is in a bad mood, and you got the kid, the happy-go-lucky teenager comes in to get the chamber pot. He's not one of these stuffy ministers. The kid comes in, he says, hey, Kingy, what's wrong? You look like you're in the dumps. The king talks to you, yeah, boy, I'm having trouble with women. Oh, well, what we do in school, we just have contests all the time. We have, day. And the king is, listen, the kid doesn't even know what he's saying. And he can talk to the king differently than everybody else. He's not a minister who's got to watch his step. Who the king's always nervous about that this guy wants to knock me off so he can be the king. There's some teenagers working a job, minimum wage. And he comes in, well, Kingy, what we do, we have contests all the time. Just pick out a nice one. And Ahasuerus is listening to this. He's like, ooh, kid's onto something over here. Ooh, that's interesting. And Ahasuerus decides to do it. So I heard a profound explanation. Rabbi Salinger told me, let me ask you a question. Put yourself in Ahasuerus' situation. You just knocked off your queen, and you want to get another queen. What would be the most logical thing to do?
Attack.
What's that?
Attack. In chess. Attack.
Attack. Attack who?
Except in chess.
You want, who you can attack? All the women? Who's there to attack? What would you do if you want to pick out a nice looking queen?
Gather the other princesses of the world.
I would just have,
Audition.
I would exactly an audition. I would have him do exactly what he did, is have a beauty contest. How brilliant, and until what do you call it, this kid says it, and Ahasuerus is like, hey, great idea. So why Ahasuerus couldn't think of that? He couldn't have thought of that? Salinger told me it's interesting insight into human nature. At certain times in life, where you got a problem and you're so bent out of shape over the problem, the solution is right in front of your eyes. You know why you don't see the solution? Because you're just so far tumult, you're so bent out of shape over the problem that, and then somebody comes along and says, well, why don't you just do this? And you're like, oh yeah, oh right. And it's right there, it's right in front of your eyes. Ahasuerus is so upset about what's happened, he doesn't see it, he can't even think straight. And that happens in life all the time. Happens in life all the time. The person, and if we would keep everything in perspective, so we wouldn't be blinded from the solution. Sometimes we create our own problems. The problem is much, much less of a problem. We've made more of a problem out of it than it really is. It can be taken care of very easily. Just throw that one out and buy a new one. What's the big deal? Well, what are we going to do? The thing got ruined. Okay, throw it out and buy a new one. What's so difficult about that? Right.
Talking about
Still talking about I didn't say that. I just said, I just said personal experience. Just throw it out and get another one. What's the big deal? So Ahasuerus implements the plan. Okay, we'll go into it tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.